Thank you so much for that warm welcome. Thank you all for your attention here. It's a real privilege to get to speak to you. I really appreciate the angle that you're taking there. I will talk some about language in my prepared remarks, and then maybe in the Q&A we can get to that. So my title is, We Do Not Have to Accept AI, in quotes, much less AGI, as inevitable in education. And I think it's really important to start with definitions. I have not yet heard anyone tell me what they mean by the phrase artificial intelligence today, though I've heard the phrase many times. And in fact, if you look into it, what you find is that this is a marketing term, and it has been a marketing term since it was first coined by McCarthy and Minsky in 1955. And we get into that in our book. I'd like to mention that all of the citations on my slides are the same as the ones in my contribution to the Think Pieces volume, so if you want the bibliography, you can find it there. This phrase, artificial intelligence, does not actually refer to a coherent set of technologies. It is a way to make many different kinds of technology sound more special, more magical, more functional than they are. And so I think the conversation gets clearer if we speak in terms of automation, and then we can ask, what are we automating? What's the input, what's the output? How was this particular form of automation constructed? How was it evaluated? And also all of the questions that you just raised. Why are we automating this? Who says that this is a task that should be automated? Who's benefiting when it's automated? And so on. What I'm going to focus on for the rest of these remarks, though, is large language models and the chatbots built out of them, because that is frequently what people are talking about when they say AI these days. And I would like you to know that chatbots, especially the ones made out of large language models, are in fact a kind of a parlor trick. It's important to know, and this is why you've got a linguist talking to you today, okay? Linguistics is the field that studies how language works and how people work with language. And in particular, I'm a computational linguist, so I study how we build language technology and also the societal effects of language technology. So a language model comes out of computational linguistics, and that is a model of the distribution of spellings of bits of words in some text that was used as training data. That is, which little bits of words went next to which other little bits of words. It's over a very large amount of text, but it is still just that. What we have in today's large language models are very effective tools for mimicking how people use language. That is, what words we say in what order. They provide, though, the illusion of reasoning or maybe intelligence because of how we understand language. You might think that when you're understanding something that someone spoke aloud or wrote down or signed using a sign language, that they took some ideas, packed them into the words, sent the words across, and you are unpacking them. But that's not actually how it works. The way it works is we keep in mind everything we know or believe about that person, everything we know or believe about what we have in the common ground with that person, and everything we know or believe about what they know or believe about their intended audience. And against all of that rich information, we ask ourselves, what must they have been trying to convey by choosing those words and in that order? And what's really important in all of that is that we necessarily are imagining the mind behind the text in order to understand it. And that's great when we are talking to other people. But it falls apart when we encounter the synthetic text that comes out of a large language model, because we can't not do it. It is how we reflexively and instinctively interpret text. And so we are imagining a mind that isn't there and attributing to it all kinds of intelligence and motivations and point of view and so on. And we have to remember that all came from within us. It's actually not in the machine. Given all that, I submit that chatbots or large language models are in fact not fit for purpose for educational applications. These are things that are designed to mimic the way we use language, and they are furthermore designed through this process of reinforcement learning from human feedback, where very large groups of data workers evaluate the output of the systems so that they output strings of words that are highly rated by people. What that means is that students are vulnerable to getting bespoke misinformation that matches the kinds of inputs they've been putting in. Also, these systems are designed to present their fake information authoritatively and convincingly. Sometimes it's right, but that's strictly by chance. And when it's wrong, teachers, who previously were used to dealing with common misconceptions, now have to fight against different narratives sold to each student, multiplying their work. Meanwhile, these chatbots are presenting information that nobody is accountable for. And this sort of accountability-free presentation of, in quotes, information construes knowledge as something that exists independently of communities of knowers, and it construes education as the simple accumulation of that knowledge. But knowledge belongs to and is negotiated by communities. Just to give you an example, if you wanted to answer the question, how long is the coastline of France? Seems like a factual question, right? Well, how closely are you measuring? Are you getting each inlet? Are you getting each rock along each inlet? Are you getting each little bit of sand along each rock along each inlet, right? So how the answer was produced matters for understanding it. But also, what if France were disputing its boundary with, say, Spain, right? Then you might need to know who did that measurement, because it might have political implications, and so on. So in order to understand information, we really have to situate it with respect to who produced it and how. But more generally, the purpose of education is not the accumulation of knowledge. We already heard today that it's about learning how to learn, and an important part of that is the ability to navigate and contribute to an information ecosystem. I've been talking so far about synthetic text, but it's important to note that all of the synthetic media are problematic. They all have serious environmental consequences. They are all built with seriously exploitative labor situations. On top of that, as I was talking about, the synthetic text extruding machines, the chatbots, provide misinformation and disconnection from sense-making. But there's also the issue of synthetic images, which sometimes are done just for fun, right? If we model their use and encourage students to use them, we are devaluing the work of artists, which was stolen to create these systems, and we're also devaluing students' own artistic expression by telling them what you do isn't good enough. You have to go for this more polished thing. And more recently, we now have access to synthetic videos, and I saw a horrific example on LinkedIn where someone suggested making students part of the story by creating a video where they are being spoken to by some historical figure. If you compare that to an exercise where students are asked to imaginatively use primary sources to write themselves into the story, where the students know what was in the primary source and what they were imagining, and they are taking an active role, you can see that it's actually much worse to have the synthetic video. So the students are in a more passive role, and they're being told that there are details of the past that are knowable when those are in fact actually unavailable. That we just simply don't know how so-and-so smiled in the past if they are from far enough in the past that we don't have video, for example. In general, the idea of putting chatbots into the classroom is disrespectful to both students and teachers, because the form of a tutoring session is not a tutoring session. To say otherwise is to flatten the work of teaching and learning into just the words that are exchanged between teachers and students. The words are important. They are the only observable part of the interaction, but they are not the heart of it, and they are not what's most important. Because teaching and learning are intrinsically social activities built around relationships in the classroom. And if we say it's just the words, that erases the work and the expertise of teachers, and it also paints students as unworthy of having caring mentors who help them grow their critical thinking. Now, you hear a lot of an inevitability discourse in this space. Have people saying, well, it's here to stay, we have to learn to deal with it. Or you must give students experience with AI lest they get left behind. To which my answer is, where is everybody going? Right? Because this presupposes that we must be running towards the tech companies' imagined future, where every more aspects of our lives are mediated by technology, and the best we can hope for is to be trained to be the kind of worker that the tech companies want to hire. But I think we can and should imagine development as working towards other goals. More opportunities for self-actualization, better health outcomes, more environmental sustainability, stronger communities. These are the kinds of futures that I want to be running towards. And education is important to all of them, both through how it helps individuals grow and through how it strengthens and builds communities. What Chris Gilliard calls technologies of isolation, where the tech companies want to mediate all of our interactions through their platforms, runs counter to these goals. And so I urge you, if you are ever in a decision-making position with respect to any of this, to examine the marketing with great skepticism, because the world of education is currently besieged with marketing for these AI systems. That marketing positions the technology as beneficial, benevolent, magical, and the way of the future. You wouldn't want to be left behind from that. But we should always ask, what's in it for them? Why are the tech companies and tech philanthropists so interested in shaping education? Well, what's in it for them? Lucrative contracts, right? Access to student data, and also reputation washing. And when we see it that way, we see what's in it for them, we can also see how much we have of value in the education sector that's worth protecting and not just giving away. So we should always be putting the interests of students first. Funds that are sent to tech companies for better or cheaper solutions are funds that would be better spent for teacher salaries and other material support for education. And sometimes the tech is given as better than nothing. I don't think so. In fact, I think it's usually worse than nothing if we're talking about chatbots. There are documented harms, both in terms of people getting overly attached to AI companions and experiencing AI psychosis, also emerging evidence of degradation of critical thinking using these systems. And then also we can ask, why is the alternative nothing, right? These are hard problems that we have to solve, but I don't think that the alternative is nothing. Finally, I think it helps in resisting this marketing when we see education systems as sites of immense value. Pushing back on that inevitability narrative is difficult, but we can be more skeptical and more suspicious when we remember that students' time, attention, and potential as individuals are of immeasurable value. And tech solutions, even if offered for no money, are never actually cost-free. So if you as a decision maker don't have time to thoroughly examine the costs, the default answer should be, no thank you.